Alright guys, so we have two big updates for you. It's a signal that desperation is mounting and China understands what the US is trying to do. Now all the tricks, all the strategies Trump used on the G7 just won't work on China. There's simply no way to checkmate China's economy without imploding your own. But even if you try to corner Beijing, they just have too many outlets with the world. Their exports won't collapse because unlike the US, it's essential for both consumers and industries. Now, it's important we understand the extent of the situation. Now, compared to last year, the first half of 2025 saw an incredible export growth of Chinese goods. Sales to the US dropped by 11%, but look at the rest of the world. Exports to Europe grew by 7%, Africa by 21%, Latin America by over 7%, exports to Southeast Asia grew by 13%, and is the biggest customer of China today. Even Japan is depending more on Chinese goods. And it makes total sense. For the foreseeable future, the US economy is turning inwards. Now, Trump has made it crystal clear everything is to be made in the US. So, US imports will eventually fall. Now, we can already see it in cars from Japan and Korea. It's now spreading to pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. Countries need to find another outlet, and that outlet is China. Now, this might surprise people, but China's imports in July actually rose by 4.1%. So they're starting to buy more from the world. China's retail growth is almost at par with their GDP growth, both at around 5%. When the Chinese middle class grows, it creates a tide that lifts not just Chinese industries, but global exporters as well. Now, just look at food consumption, up by 12%. Home appliances jumped by over 30%. So the rebalancing is really starting to happen under our noses. It's just a matter of time before Chinese consumers start importing even more stuff from the world. It shouldn't be surprising to realize what comes next. The US knows China can't be pushed around, and trying to corner them will be a self defeating exercise. Now, yes, if you embargo Chinese goods, you'll be able to force people to buy domestic US goods. But is that really a win? Prices will spike up by 50% or more, and that will crush the very consumption that Trump wants to revive. Well, here's what happened. Washington just extended the China truce for 90 days, preventing economic Armageddon. What have we said just a few weeks ago? We have yet another 90-day extension, so all the existing tariff rates stay on. So in the short term, that is a reprieve for the markets. That's why stock prices are rebounding, both in China and in the US. And chances are this 90-day reprieve will continue on indefinitely. And we really need to have a reality check here. The dream team, Trump, Bessent, and Lutnick, they all love to say countries pay the tariffs. And just a week ago, Bessent got cornered, but he's still spinning the same story about exporters taking a hit, not US consumers, and it's truly bizarre.
The check is, quote, written by the person who receives it at the dot. So the tariff is paid in this country by the importer, is that right?
But the Brazilian exporter could decide that they want to keep market share. They could lower their price so that the full 50% of the tariff, say, and
they can eat part of the cost. They can eat part of the tariff,
which is what we've seen.
Now, Brazil or any other country will simply sell elsewhere. Many products, many industries cannot afford to absorb a 30% hit to their margins. Even a 10% hit can be enough to crater their books. They will simply export elsewhere or produce less and cut costs. Now, it's really unbelievable what Bessent is saying today, 4 months after the start of the trade war. Now, just a recap, here's the state of US-China tariffs. Trump is hitting Chinese exports with a 30% tariff. Beijing is hitting US goods with a 10% import tax. However, who is really suffering here? Now, China has the ability to replace almost all US goods by trading with Europe, and BRICS are able to provide alternatives that are frankly either cheaper or better or both. So Chinese consumers are not gonna suffer. It's important we understand this distinction. Now, the same really can't be said for the US side. Both big and small businesses are starting to go under. People just can't afford to buy stuff anymore. And this is the calm before the storm, and we better pay attention to what's happening to US companies. Not just the mom and pop stores, but large companies that employ a ton of people. Listen to this update. In July, 71 large US companies went bankrupt, and this follows 65 filings each month in June and May. Year to date, there have been 446 bankruptcies, the most in 15 years, and this puts it even higher than what happened in a pandemic back in 2020. So the damage to the US economy is quantifiable. Even Bessent admitted the importer eventually has to pay for the tariffs, and this pushes up costs. It makes their products less competitive, and as a result, people buy less. Not a good situation at all. And here's the problem: the tariff revenue is still not enough compared to what Trump is spending. We are at a breaking point where tariffs are losing their effectiveness, so punishing China further has no net benefits. There's more negatives to be had. Take this in: the US deficit, the amount of excess spending, has grown to $291 billion in July, and that is despite a $21 billion jump in tariff revenue. In other words, import tax revenue grew by 2%, but government spending flew up by a whopping 10%. So even after tariff war, the compulsion to borrow and the compulsion to spend has not disappeared, it has increased. The US is gambling big with their reshoring project. It's about getting countries or their companies to bring industries back to the US. But think about it from a rational standpoint. If you want that to succeed, you can't possibly cut away the Chinese economy, especially essential inputs that US factories need to survive.
The way to think about it is these huge surpluses accumulated offshore. Let's take Japan. We're going to have 550 billion, and they will be reinvesting that back into the U.S. economy, and we will be able to direct them as we reshore these critical industries. We are trying to de-risk the U.S. economy from what we saw during COVID.
Once again, we have to underscore the big leverage China still has against the US economy. You can't make EVs, you can't make semiconductors, or even high grade military equipment at scale without them. And we are talking about rare earths plus critical metals as well. And if Bessent didn't do the extension and layered on additional pressure, the whole house of cards would crumble. Over the past 4 years, 70% of rare earths coming to the US are from China. Now, that's an astounding amount of dependence that can't be broken easily. Can Trump get supplies from Malaysia, Japan, or even maybe Russia? Now, that's possible, but it will cost more. You are demanding big amounts of supply from a very small pool of exporters. So, this is the big reason why Scott Bessent or Trump folded to Beijing. They are trying to revive US manufacturing, but without China, the entire game plan will collapse. It's like trying to hold a party where your adversary provides both the food, the tables, and they bring a ton of guests as well. Not really a smart idea to piss them off. Which brings us to the next topic today, and is a direct result of US intervention in global trade. Of course, we are talking about the chip war and China's response to the latest stunt Trump pulled. It's getting really ugly here. Now, if you don't know what happened, Trump is taxing US chip giants selling to China. They are taking revenue from their Chinese sales to subsidize the US government. Now imagine you are China. By purchasing chips from Nvidia or AMD, you are directly benefiting the US government. Undeniable now. They are taking 15% of the top out of every single sale. And that's why China is now taking action. They don't want their tech firms to even entertain the idea of buying chips from Nvidia. Just look at the headlines here. China urges firms to avoid Nvidia's H20 chips after Trump resumes sales, and it gets more intense as we go on. Beijing demands Chinese tech giants justify purchases of Nvidia's H20 chips. So if you want to buy them, you better give us a good reason, because you can obviously buy chips from Huawei or other local suppliers. Now this throws a big spanner into the gears of Nvidia, AMD, and other US tech giants. They desperately need the Chinese revenue to survive and grow. Now, to be honest, the 15% export tax from Washington won't cripple them. Their margins are way higher than 50 or even 60%. So this isn't such a brutal hit to their bottom line. They will survive and then some. However, if Beijing gives a directive, what are the chances, seriously, of Alibaba, ByteDance, and other Chinese giants ignoring the orders, close to none. They will listen and take the advice. And because of questions from regulators, the tech companies are now downsizing their orders. And this statement really sums it up nicely. It's not banned, but has kind of become a politically incorrect thing to do. And the last thing Chinese tech wants is a crackdown by the central government. So the safest move is to scale back buying Nvidia chips or maybe just stop buying them altogether. And this is terrible news for the chip giants. They need a lot of money for R&D to stay ahead, and by cutting this away, by simply not buying, Beijing is starving US technology by denying access to their markets. Less revenue for US firms means a slowdown in progress, and that allows the entire Chinese ecosystem, especially in semiconductors, to catch up. Now, China sees the bigger picture and they are doing their own version of slowing down the opponent. Guys, we are now in the age of sanctions, crazy high tariffs, revenue taxing, and outright bans. So everything today is no holds bar, hell in a cell. There's no quarter, there's no sympathy given anymore. So how big of a hit is it? Well, before Trump's April export ban, Chinese demand was estimated to hit 1.5 million chips, and that equates to more than $20 billion in sales. That was before China made progress in their industries and AI demand. We have seen multiple evolutions of DeepSeek, Menace AI, and other Chinese models. China is also amping up their energy demand. They are building up more solar farms and the hydroelectric dam in Tibet, so chip demand in China is on the verge of flying up. Now, during his trip to China, Jensen mentioned how their real advantage comes from the Chinese industrial base. It's huge. They're the world's factory and they produce a lot of stuff. And because cost needs to come down, China's pivot to industrial robots is accelerating like never before. And what do you need to power them? You need AI chips. In April, China's production of industrial robots surged by 52%, and that's a 71,500 units in a single month produced. Now, I guess the tariff war just backfired again for Trump. Now, China is driving costs lower by using robots for production, and this sets up a virtuous cycle that needs Chinese manufacturing at the top. At the same time, it drives chip demand higher, and that's why Jensen flew all the way to Beijing. He wants a big slice of this pie. And that was the dream, and I think that fantasy is coming to an end. China is not going to give Nvidia a free ride, not at least until Trump dismantles all tariffs on China. But actually, I think China doesn't even care about the trade war anymore. It actually benefits them more than it hurts them. Definitely not good for US tech companies. But let me know what you think. Will the US keep extending the China truce? And is it all over for Nvidia sales in China? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.